The review you must see from the beginning or not at all. Let's talk about Psycho.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. It's Monday, so you already know what day it is. You already know what time it is. And if you do not, that means you're a new viewer. And if you're a new viewer, welcome. So, Daniel, can you please let the new viewers know what we're going to be discussing or debating today?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we're talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960, which is both the oldest movie we've talked about so far, beating the old record by 3 years, and also one of the most iconic and analyzed and beloved and influential movies of all time. I saw Psycho for the first time a few years ago and have watched it a few times since then. I think, Jonathan, you've seen it twice and Hervey once. Is that right?
Yeah, but I didn't
First time.
remember it.
First time watching it.
So what did you think of Psycho?
I quite enjoyed Psycho. I was a little bit confused as to what the story was at the start, because I kind of went into this blind, so I didn't know anything about sort of the motel, Nathan Bateman, or his character, or anything like that at all. I was kind of going into this completely blind, so I was kind of following along with the knowledge of this is made in 1960, so was kind of appreciating it for what it was for its time. And then I was kind of thrown a loop when the main actress died, like halfway through the movie, and I was like, at first I thought, kind of used to recent movies, it was maybe a dream sequence or something along the lines, and that we're gonna cut back and she's actually awake and the movie's trying to jump scare us. But no, she very much died. And I was like, okay. After she died, I was a little bit like, okay, where is this movie going, and so what direction are we going in now that she's dead? And then of course it turns into a bit of an investigation as to where she disappeared to. I do feel like we kind of do retread a couple steps of being at the same motel and kind of following along the same kind of journey a little bit.
I was going to say, not only do they pull that twist once, but twice, 20 minutes later.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And obviously they end up at the motel under different circumstances, but it's kind of the same play out. But it was quite interesting because as you're going along this journey, you're discovering new things about the mystery, and you're discovering new things about this person that's running this motel. It kind of turns out that he's kind of got this split personality between his mother and himself. And at one point I did question, is it him just like dressing up as a woman, especially because you don't see the mother's face at all. So I did question it at one point, and then obviously the movie then confirmed it. But kind of long-winded short, because I think I was just like summarizing there a little bit. I think I enjoyed it for what it is. I wouldn't say that I'm in love with the movie. I wouldn't say that it was amazing. And again, that might just be because it was made in 1960 and it's sort of limited to what was available at the time. But in terms of the story itself, in terms of the characters and the plot and just the character interactions, especially the conversation between who's the guy at the end and Nathan Bateman's character while he was trying to distract him.
Norman Bates, by the way.
In the movie, it's called Norman Bates.
Yeah.
Or am I calling it wrong?
Jason Bateman, who is not in this movie.
Okay, all right, okay, fair. But anyways, that conversation towards the end, where he's trying to distract him, and you can feel that. That's one thing I will give the movie is it does have a good sense of tension within this as well. You can really feel the tension sort of rising in particular scenes, and you can feel sort of the stress, even all the way down to when the original actress is kind of trying to get away from the police and stuff, and she's trying to maneuver away, sell her car, and this and the other. So I think it's a good movie. I wouldn't say that I love it. I wouldn't say that I would sing and rave about this, and maybe by the end of this discussion, I might feel different about it. But I was just like, okay, it's a good watch, and I enjoyed my time with the movie.
How about you, Jonathan?
So I remembered bits while watching this, but I didn't remember what happened. Like, I didn't remember who the murderer was. I thought it was the mum, but then obviously when seeing who it actually was, it turned into, I felt like that was the point where it turned into a psychological horror, which was pretty impressive because throughout it was more of like a murder mystery / horror. But yeah, so I really enjoyed the ending, and actually, surprisingly, I enjoyed the film because at first the way that with like these old movies, the way, especially when it's black and gray, it feels very monotone. The way that they say, like, just like one level, the way that they kind of like say their dialogue. However, this one, it felt kind of real in a way. I say surprisingly, but yeah, I surprisingly enjoyed watching this, and I enjoyed how everything unfolded, and I enjoyed how it felt predictable, but it didn't feel predictable at the same time. It felt just right, if that makes sense. One thing I enjoyed as well was the voiceovers. Is it voiceover? Yeah, the voiceovers. When like she was like obviously the first actress, the main actress was driving, and then like obviously you don't see what's happening, but they're having a conversation about what's currently happening. So you know
Where she's like imagining what the others might say or how they might
exactly.
find out and how they might react. Yeah.
Exactly. And even like the scene where he got arrested and the mom was speaking, but it was really him that was speaking, so you can see in his mind what's going on. So I was like, this technique is fresh and is new. So I could tell that it was revolutionary in a way, especially when it comes to the genre, I could imagine. So yeah, man, I think what's his name? Hitchcock? What's his name? The director?
Yeah.
That is not Hitchcock, is it?
Yeah.
Is it Hitchcock? Oh, it's Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Why you say yeah like that? Are you being serious?
I'm smirking a little bit because it's like one of the most famous directors who ever directed.
Okay, cool, cool. Well, yeah, Hitchcock. Yeah, he approached this film different. Like it didn't have like the structure of any other horror film, old horror film.
And I would say this is more like a thriller than anything else. So Hitchcock is really famous for very character focused, very plotty, suspense, thriller kind of movies. And this is kind of his masterpiece, or it's definitely up there. So before we go into the like the details of the plot and what worked, what still worked and what didn't, this movie had a really fascinating production history. And there's no real like point in kind of retelling all of that because it's been talked about many times. And I would just summarize what other people have said about it. But there's two things I want to highlight. One of them is this movie didn't have to be black and white. In 1960, there were like color films existed, and the previous movies by Hitchcock were actually in color. And the reason he did make this in black and white was to be able to get away with more violence and more blood and more nudity than he otherwise would have, because this kind of dialed the impact it had on the censors. Like especially the shower scene, which is one of the great iconic scenes of cinema. Like even if you haven't seen Psycho, you probably know about the shower scene where Marion Crane gets killed in the shower, right? Like the music and the silhouette against the shower curtain and the stabbing motion and the blood running down the drain, right? All of that is really iconic. You've probably seen it spoofed, even if you haven't seen the movie itself. And that was really at the edge of what, you know, the censors would allow at the time, and they wouldn't have allowed it had it been in color. And because the blood is not red, it was more palatable at the time. So Hitchcock got away with things he wouldn't have any other way. Second one is, and this is my favorite, is this movie is the first use in cinematic history of a toilet being flushed. Remember when Marion she writes down like how much money she has and what she spent and how much is left, and then she tears it up and she throws it away and then realizes, no, this is evidence. I need to destroy it somehow, and she flushes it down the toilet, and then one small piece falls to the side, and I think I don't remember if it's the investigator or if it's the boyfriend who finds it.
The sister.
Was it the sister? Yeah, okay. The way Hitchcock designed the plot is that you could not cut the flushing toilet and still preserve the plot. So he could say this is critical to the plot. You cannot understand the movie without it, and therefore you can't cut it. And so you got a flushing toilet in the movie. It was the first time this happened. So breaking all sorts of glass ceilings here. I always get a kick out of that sort of thing. When somebody like runs circles around censors, and there are good standards, right? Like there should be a limit to like violence in children's shows and that sort of thing, right? But a lot of these rules tend to be pretty arbitrary and kind of small-minded and pearl clutching, and you know, like somebody kind of trying to get around that, either because of how they word things or how they package things, or just try to get stuff past censors. Like it's always enjoyable, and it's also kind of indicative of the times, right? Like what people thought was unacceptable in a given time says a lot about that time, right? And in 1960, television censors drew the line at flushing a toilet.
Wow. So the stabbing and all of that was cool, but when it comes to flushing the toilet, that's where they said that.
Like that was borderline too, especially because she's like naked in the shower and you don't see her fully, but you kind of, you know, you see some things, and that was already right up to the line, and that was, I think, also controversial at the time. But the thing that like you could not display was a flushing toilet, and Hitchcock like made it his mission to include it in the movie in a way that the censors couldn't remove it. So I just want to bring that up because it's funny, and because like that's one of my favorite pieces of movie trivia, that this broke that particular boundary. We don't need to like recap the entire plot, right? I think it's just a really gripping thriller, right? About it starts out like you mentioned before. It starts out as a heist movie, then turns into like an investigation, and then turns into more of a psychological drama, right? When we discover like what is going on with Norman Bates and his mother, and like what he's been doing. I think that's all wonderful. But I think the question that I'm really interested in is like, this is have you seen, which means this is looking at movies with fresh eyes, not having seen it before, and like having a fresh reaction to an older movie, right? And this movie relies really heavily on twists and shock value and doing things the audience does not expect. So one of them is the double twist, and you've already mentioned it, but we've said before in various reviews that good movies have a tendency to change the rules at the 50% mark, right? Because it gives you time to build up like a status quo, and then you change it, and then you have enough time to see, to see the effects of that change, right? Parasite does this at the 50% mark. The New Guy has a big character moment where the character changes his mind about what he wants midway through and has to deal with the ramifications of his decisions in the first half. Batman Begins was one we talked about a few weeks ago, where he puts on the costume at the 50% mark. And the first half is about becoming Batman, and the second half is about what he does as Batman, that sort of thing. So there's lots of great movies that do this. And this movie does it twice, and it did it in 1960. So does it work? Does it like you kind of mentioned that you were surprised, right? You thought you were watching one kind of movie, and then it turns into another movie, and then they do it again. They play the same trick on you twice. So like, did it work? And did the second twist have like a different impact as the first one?
For sure, the first one definitely got me. The first one definitely shocked me. I knew there was something off about the motel manager, especially the way that they were conversating and the way that sort of they were interacting. So there was already that level of uneasiness. But because we'd become so familiar with Marianne, I did not see her dying at the point that she died in the movie. Hence why I was like, is it a dream sequence, or is she imagining things? Because, you know, the movie had done a good job to kind of get us comfortable and kind of get us on board with the journey that she was on. And the story that she was essentially following. So I had a level of investment in the character, and then it got to that point. She's taking a shower, and I thought it was just going to be like a weird thing, and then she's going to sort of find the manager weird. She's going to maybe try to leave, and he's not going to let her, and it's going to, you know, be a movie where she gets tormented throughout. But she died.
The next 45 minutes could have been about her running away from Norman Bates around the motel. And there's like one close call after the other, right? That's your usual slasher movie, right?
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. But this one took a different turn, and in doing so, I don't think it worked as effectively the second time around. And the main reason for that was we were kind of just thrust onto this private investigator character. There wasn't enough setup and enough time to have that same level of emotional connection that you had with the first character. And very much once he became obsessed, and once we kind of knew that there was this sort of risk of people dying in the movie, and that there's a high chance that, you know, this person could die in the movie, once he kind of started to go and dig a little bit deeper into the house and sort of try to go speak to the mother, I kind of expected him to die. And I do feel like his death, even for 1960, was a little bit lame. The way that it was shot of him like falling down the stairs and stuff, it just looked super unrealistic. So I wasn't as impacted. I wasn't as moved by the second death and the second twist once we then moved to the love interest and her sister.
The effect of him falling down the stairs is a little bit janky. But as he goes up the stairs and we kind of look, like the camera looks down on the staircase and we see him come up and kind of look around, and then Norman wearing the dress. At this point, we don't know that that's him. So at this point, you still think it's the mother, right? And her running into frame with a knife, just stabbing. I still think it's a cool shot. And then, you know, the actual falling is not as much. But, you know, this again could have been drawn out longer, right? He could have just walked around the house for another 5 to 10 minutes. Like in another kind of movie. So I think this is absolutely. I think the scene itself, I think, is like absolutely works. I do agree he's not as interesting like as a main character, and if he had been the main character for the rest of the movie, maybe that would have not been as compelling. But I don't think you expect a movie to change protagonists twice, right? Even in modern movies, I don't remember one that does it. Like there might be some, it would still, like, if a movie came out today doing that, it would still be like novelty, right? It would still be unusual.
Just go back to the point that you made about a different movie would have had him investigate the house for a little bit more. I felt like it worked really well in this movie that he didn't, because it then added to the mystery, because it seemed like with every character shift we were getting one step closer to really finding out the truth about what was going on. So at first, when they're first in the house, with Marianne's character, is that the mother is just someone that's possibly in the house, or whatever, and you don't really get anything more than that. You don't really get to sort of see the house. And then with the private inspector, you just get that extra step in, and you sort of you kind of start to see a little bit more of this environment that he's living in. And then of course with then the sister at the very end, that's when you get a full exploration as to the room and sort of where they stay, where the pretend mother is staying, and where sort of the what's the motel guy's name?
Norman.
Yeah, where Norman's staying, and you kind of delve a little bit more into the psyche and delve a little bit more into sort of the character there. So I feel like that element of it was perfectly done.
Yeah, it's like this escalation, right? Each one gets a little bit further.
Yeah.
For me, so it was similarly done in Barbarian. So I was familiar with this, this technique, and clearly you saw where Barbarian got his influences from. So when it came to the second protagonist dying, I felt it was a good add-on. I'm sure, like it was a hint. Obviously, when you're seeing at the time of the film, you're already seeing that, okay, and there's a lot of there's other characters as well. So you're seeing already that there's already a hint given that, okay, this guy may not be the one to find the answers, even though he's the inspector. So obviously that adds to the whole like moment of that, the iconic moment of him dying, because like he's an inspector, he's seeking for answers, and he's the next protagonist down the line. Surely it should be him, but it's not him. So even though it's predictable, I still think it was fitting, and it was just a good add-on to already the shock value that we had from the main actress dying. So for me, of course, it definitely wasn't as impactful as the first character dying, because like Hervé, he was right. We already were emotionally engaged with her because, her story was told more. However, I do think it was just a good add-on. It definitely made the stakes higher, and it made the interest go higher as well when it comes to finding out why the mother's doing what she's doing. Obviously, we know now at the end that she is not. It wasn't her, but it just made me wonder, like, what the hell's wrong with this woman? Why is she doing the madness? So, yeah, I think for me it was a good add-on.
I think, Hervé, you said something contrary to that, but I think you said the investigator is not as interesting or something like that, right? I actually think all three storylines could carry a movie if they wanted to, right? The first one is about somebody who stole money, tries to start over, and gets kind of caught by the psychopath. Second one is trying to find a missing person and kind of then wanders into this remote location where the serial killer is. And then the third one is somebody trying to kind of find their like the family member, right? Like they're all kind of similar, but I think each one could have carried the movie, like if they wanted to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. And I do feel like the story between the love interest and the sister picked the movie back up a little bit in terms of wanting them to find a little bit more answers, and the fact that there was two of them this time. It was sort of interesting to see how Norman would deal with that, because obviously he's now has two people to try and watch over, to try and contend with, and see. It was interesting the game that they played to try and outsmart him, because he doesn't know that they have a certain level of information that was already passed on to the investigator, and it felt like we was sort of on that ride with the characters, where with Marianne we know completely nothing, so we're kind of caught by surprise when she dies. And then with the private investigator, we know that he is a killer, and we're on the journey with him where we're trying to get the answers as well, and we're trying to sort of figure out, okay, what's this guy's deal, what's going on, sort of who did what, etc. And then with the two at the end, we're kind of on the journey with them of trying to, okay, now we have to outsmart him, because he's intelligent, clearly he sort of knows how to not manipulate people, but kind of talk his sort of way out of certain situations, and talk people into kind of following what he wants them to do. So once we was with them, it was like, okay, let's try to outsmart him. Let's try to be a little bit more clever in what we're doing. And then when they came up with the brilliant plan of he goes and just talks to him and keeps him in place, because And from what we've seen is that Norman's character is a talker. He likes to talk, and he knows how to sort of waffle to people. So him sort of kind of holding him in one place and her going to investigate, I thought again that was great with the obviously added background story that they had of he's the love interest that she was running to, and it's questionable how much he loved her, or like how much he was not super questionable, but it was kind of questionable as to sort of know what his deal was with her. How sort of much he did love her, because obviously he had like the ex-wife and stuff like that with I think the kids as well. Like I can't remember. And then
Maybe.
obviously she's then yeah, and then she was obviously the sister, just like trying to find her, and with a little bit more runtime, you can imagine how well they could have sort of developed that story as well to make it even more interesting than what we got. But even then, it was still enough, and we were still on that sort of journey with them, which was great.
And each one of those three, I think, is held together by Norman, right? Because he's kind of the constant. And like you said, each time, like in each storyline, we know more about him, but he kind of has kind of the same act, but it kind of acquires different connotations, I thought. First time around, he's a bit weird, and until he takes that window off the wall to spy on her as she's getting ready for the shower, like he's just a little bit weird, but he hasn't really done anything. Like he's super polite and he's a bit off, but he hasn't done anything yet. And even when the investigator arrives, we don't know that he's the killer. We think the mother's the killer, and he cleans up after her victims, right, for her, because he's talked about how he runs errands for mother, and it's kind of half his hobbies, right? It's taxidermy and running errands for mother. And that kind of comes into play when he disposes of Marion's body and the car and all of that. And then by the third time around, we still don't know that he is mother, but we know more about him. We know for sure that he's the killer, and we know that he is the danger, right? And so, like, even though the events kind of like people arrive at the motel and they talk to Norman, Norm is polite but a bit weird. Like it unfolds differently each time because the characters are catching up, but the audience knows more each time. So, which is kind of cool. Like, I think that's how you prevent it from becoming repetitive and stale.
I wanted to ask about, so towards the end of the movie, you have the psychologist or psychiatrist that goes on a long exposition dump about the character and his split personality disorder and about the dynamic between the two. And as I was, watching it and knowing the time and knowing, the research and understanding of mental illnesses wasn't as advanced as it is in today's age, and we didn't have as much of an understanding of it in that time. How significant was that for the movie to include something like that? How relevant was it? Was it groundbreaking in that sense, or what was there any kind of real life significance of having a character sort of represent that and embody that in the movie?
I haven't researched like the overall like reception of that. I think audiences at the time just didn't know what to make of this, right? And that is why the filmmakers felt the need to include that explanation. And from what I know, even at the time, people thought this was a bit heavy-handed and a bit unnecessary. And especially like over time, it's very much rooted in its time, right? Like the way he explains this to the other people and kind of what they think of it. It seems very dated, right? Like how they talk about this. And I don't know to what extent split personalities are actually a real thing, the way they're portrayed in movies. And obviously, since then, there have been many different movies that kind of deal with the same idea. But I think at the time, this was fairly new. I think at the time, madness was just, you just go crazy spontaneously, and, like society has to deal with you. And here it has like causes, and it's rooted in like childhood trauma. And my reading, at least, of it is that for 1960, this was fairly nuanced. But then, of course, they turned it into like a shocking thriller. And it's not exactly like an extensive portrait of somebody like Norman, right? That we're not really investigating like how his mind works. We're kind of just shown like what he does with it, and what he does is like dress up like his mother and kill people, right? Mostly because of he's internalized her judgments of him, right? It seems to be like she could not stand the idea of another woman in Norman's life, and so when she died, he kind of incorporated that into his split personality. That any woman he finds like in his life and feels some kind of connection to has to go, right? And that is where Mother comes out. But that was kind of my other question, right? Because this is the other big twist in this, right? That this is not like Mother is a fictitious personality and that that Norman was the killer the entire time, right? There's a lot of fake outs, right? Where actually it's not just like the actor doing two voices, right? Like I think this is definitely like a woman's voice we hear, like when like Marion, he overhears them talking and arguing with each other. I think that's definitely not Anthony Perkins doing two voices, right? Which is what it should be, right? So the movie is going out of its way to hide this from us, which seems a little bit like cheating.
He didn't do that voice?
I don't think so. It sounds like a woman's voice to me.
It felt like at the end he was. Like, it kind of. Well, it's not even it felt like he was. I believe he was, because that was part of the revelation, wasn't it?
When there's a voiceover, like when we just see when Norman has been arrested and he's in police custody, and we see like zooming in on his face and we hear Mother's monologue.
I believe that's still his voice. I think that's just that's him. He's believing that's his mother's voice, but that's really his voice.
I think, no, what Daniel's saying is that the voice that they use is the voiceover of a woman, an actual woman. It's not someone else's like voice in his mind. It's actually that, as in like a woman did the voiceover, which is a little bit like cheating, because he should have did it, and then the audience could have picked up on the fact that it's a male trying to impersonate a woman's voice, basically.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
it's an actual woman's voice, is what you're trying to say.
Right. So when we hear, like when we watch the movie and we hear Mother speak, it's not Anthony Perkins doing a woman's voice.
I see.
That's what I mean. But that's what it like in the story. That's what it would be, right? And so when Marion hears Norman and Mother argue, we should hear one person speaking and doing two different voices, and we actually get two different voices. That I think that is a little bit misdirection in terms of letting the audience believe that there is actually a person, like another person in the house.
But I'll be honest with you, with me, the voice did sound kind of dodgy, though. It didn't, like, I hear what you guys are saying. Obviously, it wasn't his voice, but it did kind of seem, obviously during the film, I did think it was his mom. But afterwards, when we find out, obviously, it was just him, it's still, like, the voice did kind of sound like it could give the impression for me that it could have been him that was playing it. You know what I'm saying? So.
But for everything else, they're very careful that Mother never speaks while we see Norman, for example.
Yeah.
And like the whole thing, like he has an explanation for everything about why she can't come to the motel, why nobody can talk to her. We know that something is up, obviously, because we're watching a thriller movie. But like he always has an excuse, and it's an excuse that works. Like that could be true. And I think the twist kind of, at least when you're watching it in 1960, the twist kind of relies on you not expecting this. And now, obviously, everybody knows, kind of knows what the twist is. And the question kind of here is, does it still work? Like, if you are, like, did the misdirect work on you in 2025?
Hard to say, because I didn't know. I didn't know. Obviously, there was, like, the concern of us not seeing his mother and, you know, the mother not being visible. I mean, my one question I did have was how his supposed mother had the strength to kind of overpower and kill the police investigator. That's when my alarm bell started ringing, thinking, okay, this can't be an old woman. And I actually would have been disappointed in the movie if it was, because I then would have questioned, okay, how did this PI, who's probably been in several scraps, get killed by an old woman? So alarm bells were ringing then.
Like a young person, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the way that she ran up on him, for sure. But even with doubting that, I still didn't know that it was him that was dressing up as his mother and committing the killing. So for me, it worked. As someone that, you know, has watched similar types of movies but hadn't watched this one, I think if you're going into it with fresh eyes, I think it still works, because of the way that the movie actually built it up, and because of, again, the way that the movie sold you on the story that Norman is selling here. Even the fact that he's sort of saying that his mother has, you know, certain illnesses, whilst we might not believe it's what he's saying, there's definitely something about his perceived mother that he's trying to hide, and because we believe that she's alive at that point, because, you know, I believe that he was cleaning up after her mess as well, that I didn't question that it might be him up until quite late in the movie, and then we obviously got the reveal. So for me, it still works. It still carries.
I think what put us off, and what we should have caught on as well, is what put me off was when he picked up his mum and he was walking down the stairs with her. That's when I was like, all right, cool. So this lady's like, I wasn't even doubting the existence of the mum at all. But at the end of it, when we found out it was a guy, I was like, okay, wait. When was this? How could this have been? So when I was reevaluating everything, I was like, okay. So I think what would have kind of like threw me off course in terms of like finding out, in terms of like knowing that it was the son, was when he actually picked up the mum and he brought her down the stairs when they were arguing about her going in the basement. So I was thinking, okay, she's actually alive. That's number one. Number two, the hint that there was something wrong with the son should have been when he was sinking the car. When he sunk the car, he had, even before that, he was a bit weird. But I just thought that's because he was just, because, you know what I'm saying? The way that he talks about his mom, you can tell he's like one of those kids that's, still like a mama's boy or whatever. But when he sunk the car after she died, he had a smirk. So I was like, oh, I didn't clock on to. I just thought because he was weird. But
I think that was because at first it looks like the car isn't sinking. It's kind of stuck halfway. And he's kind of concerned that he might not be able to get rid of the evidence. And then after a minute or so, it starts sinking in, and that's when he smiles. And he's like, oh, it all worked out.
But however, like when he was getting rid of the evidence, he looked shocked, he looked scared. So even if he was smiling because he was successful, he's like, a lot of the times when you're hiding evidence for someone else, like you're still going to kind of have like that worried look on your face, or you're still going to be worried at the end of the day. You're not really gonna smile at your achievement for sinking for sinking evidence. Do you know what I'm saying? So
it's more relief than anything else. Like he was worried that he would not be able to hide the car.
His face showed there was more sinister, there was something sinister going on there. For me personally.
And yeah, I do think it sells you on the idea that he's done this before. It's kind of creative. It's kind of purely from his mannerisms. You can see like this is routine. Like every once in a while, somebody stays in the motel, and for one reason or another, they get picked out as a target. Right? This is not an isolated case. The hole in the wall covered by the painting is already the first clue, right? From the way he does the cleanup and the way he disposes of the evidence, I think that very clearly shows that he's done this before, and that kind of implies a whole backstory. Right? You can imagine like a whole bunch of different cases. Now it turns out that the sheriff later says there are only 2 missing people in the area, and maybe that doesn't include like people who were just passing through or something. But like you can imagine, like in that moment as he's watching the car sink into the swamp, you can imagine an entire backstory to him that we never need to hear. It's just implied in his facial expressions. He has mopped blood off a bathroom floor before. Right? Like this is not new territory for him. He's not panicking. He's not improvising. He's done this before. And that kind of then rhymes with his statement about running errands for mother. And then at that point, that recontextualizes the entire conversation where they're having dinner. Where just as you're watching it, I think for the first time, it's very clear that there's something wrong with Norman, but we don't know what. And he could just be a little bit eccentric. But I think that plants the initial seeds that Norman is not quite who he says he is, and that there's something sinister going on here. But at that point, I think if you watch it for the first time, at least I did, I kind of assumed that he was kind of being controlled by mother. Yeah. Right? That he was kind of a victim in this, like maybe an accomplice, but he was the kind of child who is kind of dominated by their parent and kind of lives as an extension of his parents. Like that could have been the case, right? Or at least based on his early demeanor and his statements. And then obviously we start peeling back the onion and we start seeing more aspects to Norman. And then we finally, in the end, we kind of see what his real deal is. But I think that part is just masterful, that something is up from the beginning and he doesn't begin to hide it, because Hitchcock doesn't even begin to hide it because we know what kind of movie we're watching. But what exactly is wrong is not clear until the very end. And I sent you guys the trailer, right? The 6-minute trailer where Hitchcock gives you a tour of the house. So what's interesting about that is it's basically a 6-minute trailer where Hitchcock shows you around the set. And he keeps talking about how, okay, this is where the woman was seen, and here's where the first murder happened. And, he goes into the bathroom and says, oh, such brutality. It's like, I don't want to dwell on it, right? He keeps it's a 6-minute long teaser where he just keeps essentially explaining the plot, but he just leaves out like very surgical details. He talks about this is where the woman was seen. But you don't know who that is, and you don't know what that means, but something is up. Somebody was killed here, and so on, right? And I think it's just expert trolling, especially for 1960, where he's playing with the audience in these very fun ways. And like one of the little things about Psycho is that Hitchcock imposed a rule where, like, apparently in 1960s, this sounds really weird. I've never, like, it does not seem ring true, but apparently in 1960 it was common for movie audiences to kind of just show up whenever, and they would watch the rest of the movie and then watch the next showing so that they saw the whole thing. So people would randomly show up whenever they had time. And I don't know if they didn't know when the show started or whatever, right? Like, but they didn't like show up in the beginning, watch the entire thing, and then left. And Hitchcock had a rule where if you were a theater and you wanted to show Psycho, you had to close the doors when the movie starts. You like everybody had to be seated, and nobody could be let in after the movie starts, which is I don't think anybody has ever done again. And the whole thing is that that's the only way the story works, right? The whole reveal and killing the lead twice, you have to watch it from beginning continuously without interruptions, right? And it's really interesting that all the cinemas went along with it. And he basically, like, all the marketing says, tell your friends to watch it, but don't tell them what's going on. Just let them find out for themselves. I think it's and that's anticipates spoiler culture by like 50 years, something like that. It's kind of interesting.
So he changed cinema culture then. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how much lasting impact it has. Like, it's not like movies started doing this afterwards, but like it's interesting that he was able to kind of micromanage the audience in this way.
And the trailer definitely was unique. Now,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, would it have attracted me, or would it have wanted, like, after seeing the trailer, imagine if I was in the 1960s, would I have wanted to go and see the film?
Like, you mean if you saw the trailer and said, like, if you saw the trailer, the 60s trailer now and said, oh, I'm going to seek out this old movie, or if a new movie came out that was advertised this way?
Yeah, so both. Wow, originally I was going to say the first one, but the second one that you just said, point that you made, that's a good point too.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think why I like it is I've kind of been on record that I think trailers are terrible, have been for the last 10 years, because they either tell way too much or way too little, and they don't know how to make the plot interesting, like, or they don't know how to kind of invoke a sense of curiosity where you want to say, okay, this premise sounds really cool, I want to see how, like, where the movie goes. It's almost never the case. We usually see way too much. We see all the highlights, or we see nothing at all. We have no idea what the movie's about and who it's for. And here he's outright telling you, yeah, this is a murder mystery and somebody gets killed, and if you want to find out who it is, you're gonna have to watch my movie. And it's like, it's a kind of a fresh take where he outright tells you what kind of movie this is, and kind of shows you a lot. You know, you think you know what's going on, and then you actually see it, and it's actually quite different. Like, I think actually more trailers should be like this. It's this kind of movie, and this is the idea, and this is what you can expect, but without actually telling you the important parts. So if you watch the 6-minute trailer, you are not actually spoiled. Not really, right? You don't know anything about Norman. You don't know anything about Mother. You don't know who gets killed or why or how. Even though you see all the locations and he tells you a whole bunch of stuff, you are not actually spoiled. And I think that is kind of interesting that people are so careful and so afraid of spoiling something that people don't really have a clear dividing line of what is a spoiler and what isn't. In my view, is kind of the premise can't be a spoiler. And kind of here's Hitchcock backing me up on this, which is kind of refreshing, right? Here Hitchcock has a very clear idea of what is and isn't a spoiler for this movie, and what you can know without it ruining your experience of the movie, and he's very precise about what he doesn't tell you. I think it's kind of cool.
You know what's a bit mad? Because it does kind of reveal who dies, though. And we didn't clock on. Because
I don't think he does. I think he just says this is where a person was killed. I think.
But the girl, when he pulled back the shower curtains, wasn't that the same girl in the film? Or was that someone different?
Okay, yeah, we see Marion scream in the shower. Yeah, okay.
That should have been a hint in a way, but it's crazy that I didn't even realize. Like, yeah, it's crazy that I didn't realize. I think most people didn't realize that. Oh, okay, he did kind of tell us who dies, but a lot, like, when you saw it, did you realize that she was gonna? Wait, did you see the trailer before or after the film?
After the film.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, it won't work for you. It's someone with fresh eyes, because I'm sure most people, if they saw that trailer, they wouldn't have been able to see that. Oh, okay, that's the woman that dies. So that's actually. It's effective. It's effective.
I think it's really interesting. And it's funny that he kind of anticipates all my complaints I have 60 years later about spoiler culture. I just felt really vindicated watching this. I just want to show it to everybody who talks about don't spoil a 60-year-old movie. It's like, here's what Hitchcock had to say. Are you going to argue with Alfred Hitchcock about suspense and ruining a movie?
I hear it. It's just when it comes to spoilers, I'm definitely those people that don't like spoilers. However, it depends on... But at the same time, I do hear where you're coming from as well, because a lot of trailers they're just not great when it comes to kind of like selling the story. They don't even include the story; they just include pretty much the generic stuff. Like this, you know what I'm saying? It's just you see generic stuff in films, whereas I think they should find a way, for me personally, to not spoil it, but still reveal what the premise is about. And I don't think that's spoiling it. So if you
Yeah.
say, for example, like someone has died, then some people, especially in our generation, they will see that as a spoiler. However, for me, that's not really a spoiler. I think that is the selling point. So
The how and what and why are kind of important,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So I do agree to an extent when it comes to the whole overreaction to spoilers. I think, like, come on, guys, like, if they don't show nothing at all, how the hell are we going to, how are we gonna want to watch the film? So yeah.
It's going to be different for every movie, but it's a very unique take on a trailer, and I wish more trailers did it.
I feel like it would be a good technique to use when it comes to mystery films in general.
Yeah.
It fit really well in the murder mystery, actually. I think
Yeah.
just the idea of like letting people know certain items, certain things.
Yeah, no,
certain
yeah. Certain items is
things.
great because like you're giving us
Yeah,
clues already, hints, so that kind of keeps us engaged in the film as well. So that's, yeah, you're right in terms
yeah.
of like the whole item thing.
All right. Any other thoughts on Psycho?
I'm wondering if I would have enjoyed it more if it wasn't in black and white. Because I think black and white, for me, it kind of gave it grace when it came to like certain scenes. I was like, that's a bit, you can tell that was an old movie. However, I understand the whole, manipulating censorship and all of that. So I do give it a benefit of that. And it was a low budget film, I believe. So
I quite
I
enjoyed
think it
it.
was
I think
fairly
that
low
was
budget.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. I think this was like my first black and white movie I've watched, possibly.
Really.
And I know that's blasphemy.
Dinner for One is in black and white.
Oh, okay. Second. Okay, but it was quite refreshing actually, switching on and seeing the black and white, and I think that helps as well for all the movies and around the time to kind of immediately transport you into that time because it's black and white, and you just already picture a different time. You picture a world without the technology that we had, and it just helps to immerse you into the storytelling and then the way that it's being shot and produced as well. Just because of that, and not to say that other movies from like maybe the 80s or 90s aren't able to do that as well, but I feel like just with a black and white movie, it just immediately takes you there on the first visual.
So does this go on the shelf? Has this rewatch potential? You want to check out other Hitchcock after seeing this?
In terms of rewatch potential, I think it'd be great to watch it with someone that hasn't watched it before, just to see how they react to the movie and see if they fall for the twists and turns the same way that I did. I feel like that would be a good way to rewatch it. But in terms of does it go on the shelf? Hard to say because it's not a movie that I think I'd rewatch by myself. I don't think that I would just pop this on, if I wanted to watch something. And again, that's more so personal preference. That's just some of my personal biases when it comes to movies. But I definitely see its appeal. I definitely see why it's been praised so much and why people love it as much as they do. So yeah, for me, I think overall a very, very good, very enjoyable experience. Very good, very fun ride as well, actually. And just all the twists and turns, not knowing what to expect, and kind of being thrown for a loop throughout the movie a couple of times. I think that definitely held up, and that definitely has aged really, really well with this movie. So yeah, very, very solid outing. I'd give it a good 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I've seen it 4 times in the last 3 years. And every time I watch it, I enjoy it more. And for some reason, despite being this mystery thriller that's all about the big twists, somehow the better I know it, the more I enjoy it. Because I kind of know what the deal is more. Like, for instance, first time I watched it, that dialogue scene between Norman and Marion, like as she's having dinner, I didn't know what the point was. Like Norman, because this is like in a regular slasher movie, which this kind of is, right? It's kind of like that would be kind of the boring 20 minutes before the killing starts, right? And here it's actually a window, like the first real window into how Norman's mind works. And that turns out to be of incredible importance later on, because that's kind of the entire story in the end. And I didn't really appreciate that the first time because I didn't know which parts mattered, right? And now that I do, I enjoy that scene more. And every time I watch it, it gets more interesting. Not necessarily because I'm discovering new aspects, but more because the pieces fit so well together that, like, on rewatch, the pieces kind of click into place more and quicker.
For me, I would say I would have it on my shelf, but not to rewatch it on my own. I'd probably like rewatch it with people, like pretty much similar to what Hervé said. I'd rewatch it with people, to see if the shock value worked on them the way that it worked on me. So yeah, it. I will definitely commend it for like the drama as well of it. Like it was like the dialogue was it was really good. Like I was engaged, something which I find because I've tried to watch black and white movies before, especially like on a channel called Film 4 back in the day when I had Sky. Well, I still kind of have Sky, but they used to show like the black and white movies in the morning, right? So whenever I was calling sick from school, and yeah, I'll just be chilling watching those movies. But it was so hard to get into. I just found it so hard to just stay engaged with the story with the way that it was being, acted. But in this one, it was definitely engaging. It was engaging and it was acted well. So I would definitely commend it for that. And the story it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. So, but in terms of watching it off my own accord, I just can't see myself like wanting to do it to watch it by myself, like say for like in comparison to like Hunger Games, for example, or even Sinners, like what we're going to talk about next. But yeah, do you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, this is definitely something I would have on my shelf to rewatch with someone else, and just because it's a classic, so I'll definitely have it on my shelf. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining into today's discussion. It didn't turn into a debate; it turned into a discussion. So, Hurley, can you please do your little plug-in?
Yeah, I mean, if you got to this point of the episode, thank you for rocking with us. Of course, if you liked everything that we discussed, tell a friend. And if you hated everything that you heard on this episode, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
You heard it here first, guys, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.